And we can go.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the work session of Idaho Water Resource Board meeting number 5-23. Joanne needs to mute her mic. There's a Brian.
It's me. I just
Oh,
canceled the Zoom.
okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, the meeting's been called to order. The first agenda item is roll call. Jennifer?
Okay, Mr. Barker,
Present.
Ms. Cole-Hansen,
Present.
Mr. Gibbs,
Present.
Mr. McMahon,
Here.
Mr. Olmstead,
Here.
Mr. Stevenson,
Here.
Mr. Van Stone,
Here.
and Chairman Raybould.
Here. Okay, thank you. The next agenda item is executive session. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to Idaho Code 74-2061 subsection F, I request that the board resolve into executive session to communicate with legal counsel regarding legal ramifications of legal options for pending litigation or controversies not yet being litigated, but imminently likely to be litigated. I request that a roll call vote be taken, that the secretary record the vote in the minutes of the meeting.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Could we have another roll call vote, please, Jennifer?
Absolutely. Mr. Barker,
Aye.
Ms. Cole-Hansen,
Aye.
Mr. Gibbs,
Aye.
Ms. McMahon,
Aye.
Mr. Olmstead,
Aye.
Mr. Stevenson,
Aye.
Mr. Van Stone,
Aye.
and Chairman Raybould.
Aye. Okay, we are now in executive session. Next agenda item. We'll call the meeting back to order. Now we're recording. Anderson Ranch Dam Raise update.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. I think Cynthia Bridge Clark here, and I think we have Lainey Payton from the Bureau of Reclamation. She's going to provide us a briefing on the project, and I have just a couple of comments after her updates. So Lainey, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you. Thank you for being here.
Great. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. Good morning. Really pleased to be with you, as always, to provide an update on the Anderson Ranch Dam Raise project, albeit remotely. I hope all is going well with you as you're traveling for these meetings. So for this morning, I thought I would update you on a few areas, particularly our engineering design activities, as well as update regarding our plans for water operations at Anderson Ranch Dam during the construction period, and point to some of our next steps. And of course, along the way, welcome any questions. So with that, I'll go ahead and jump in. At the last board meeting, I was largely discussing and providing sort of a high-level overview of our 30% designs and what that means for both our dam raise component of the project, as well as those projects that are situated around the reservoir. We refer to those as the RIM projects in short. I had highlighted that we have two specific review processes that we conduct in addition to our internal review of the 30% designs. And those are a value engineering study and constructability reviews. And again, we conducted, the plan is to conduct those on both projects, dam raise and RIM projects. And just to, as a refresher, I would note that Reclamation's value engineering studies are designed to evaluate design alternatives that would look for opportunities to create more value out of the project, but while continuing to meet that same level of engineering standards. And this could include, and largely has an eye towards, looking for potential cost savings. In the way we conducted the value engineering studies here on this project, I want to highlight how important and beneficial it has been to have our managing partners and agencies participate and contribute to that. So I'd like to highlight and thank the Forest Service staff, our Highway District staff, and the Water Resource Board staff for their contributions and participation. It's really has been a very important part of our work here on the design aspect. When it comes to constructability reviews, here's where Reclamation pulls together a diverse team of experts to dive in deeper into our designs and specifically look for construction-related risks, thinking about how we're sequencing projects, how materials are sourced, what does the marketplace look like in the construction world, and then to identify alternatives or mitigation strategies to address those risks. So with that as the landscape, I wanted to update you all to let you know that we have completed our internal reviews of the 30% design. We've conducted value engineering studies for both the dam raise and the reservoir rim projects. And we've conducted the constructability review for the dam raise component. I do want to note that we decided that it would be more beneficial on the rim projects to couple the constructability review for our 60% design milestone. So that is one element I will continue to update you on as we progress there. So with all of that information in hand, what we're doing now is consolidating and evaluating the recommendations that came out of those studies in order to make decisions around what recommendations we're going to carry forward and analyze in our environmental compliance, as well as integrate into our 60% design milestone. On the engineering front, the last piece I would update you on is recognition that our drill crew and geologists have continued to conduct field explorations specifically around the reservoir rim. And we do have more work in that geotechnical realm that we plan for this fall, and that will have to be tied with a specific reservoir levels. We are thankfully have a received a full reservoir this season, and so we have to adjust and wait for the timing there to coincide with our water. Before I move on to a discussion about our water operation plans during construction, I will go ahead and pause to see if there are any questions about our design activities.
Thank you. And board members, any questions for Lainey? I think we're fine, Lainey.
Okay, that sounds great. When I talk about water operations during construction, I want to again recognize that the Corps and Reclamation jointly operate the Boise system for multiple purposes, and specifically to optimize that water supply and flood control purposes and needs for the basin. In that case, so I guess the key point here is the Corps is a close partner with us and has ultimate responsibilities when it comes down to flood control decisions. And so I want to be recognize and be appreciative of our partnership with the Corps, and talk about how we've been working with the Corps to understand how we will operate the dam and flood, water control operations, really zooming into that flood control season arena and what that looks like today. So I do want to highlight that we are looking at, as I mentioned last time, a 4-year construction horizon. But when it comes to operating during the flood control season, we're really zooming in on the 2-year period of working on the spillway modifications. This is the time in the construction period where we will have constraints on our ability to pass a major flood event. And so with that, working with the Corps, the form we have taken to document and address how we plan to operate is as a request for deviation from our water control manual. And again, we have just recently received back approval from the Corps after a lot of collaborative work that tells us what those key elements of our plan will be. And I'd like to share those with you here this morning. So again, looking at that 2-year period of working on the spillway, we will integrate an earthen cofferdam to the crest elevation of 4,203, so 4,203 feet. This is a good sized cofferdam, and it's a key element of making sure that we have the ability to manage, again, those high flood releases. We will also be updating our emergency action plan at the facility to really target the conditions there at the facility during construction. And this is the next element is really a key piece to understanding how these operations have the potential to affect our existing space holders. And we've talked about this over the years, and that is what type of reservoir restriction will we need to plan for during this construction period, and working with the Corps and doing analysis on those range of possibilities of flood control scenarios. We have identified a reservoir restriction of 28,000 acre feet. So this is the plan we will continue to move forward with as we move towards that construction period and as the project proceeds. And this is an approach that the Corps also has analyzed and has approved for us. I would like to take a moment to talk about what that 28,000 acre feet mean to the project. So again, just recognizing that this is a critical nexus to our existing space holders, because there is always the potential for a shortfall in storage to result from that reservoir restriction, given certain hydrologic conditions. And so this is an area where I know Reclamation Water Resource Board is especially committed to ensuring that we have a strong mitigation plan to clearly and fully mitigate for that potential impact to our existing space holders. And I would recall where we were at when we were conducting our draft EIS, environmental impact statement, where we had quite a bit of uncertainty. And the range we were looking at was between 55 to 97,000 acre feet of a potential reservoir restriction. And so today, really pleased to be able to share with you all that through the analysis, we've got a much firmer sense of what that operation will look like. And it is considerably lower than what we had had to consider previously. So with this more detailed analysis and the coordination with the Corps in hand, and we have this clearer view, what we will be doing next, and recognize how important it is to take the time to identify and evaluate what those range of opportunities are to mitigate fully for any storage shortfall. And that will include having meaningful conversations with our existing space holders and with you, the board, as our project partner. I would note that understanding what that mitigation plan looks like is especially important to integrate into our environmental compliance, so that we can properly analyze both the potential impact for storage, but also what our plan is to mitigate. And so I think at that point, I just want to make sure I'm communicating with you all and sharing the commitment that you've expressed with Reclamation about ensuring that we keep our space holders whole over the course of this project, and we are on track to do that.
Any questions on that topic?
Yeah.
Yes. Al has a question, and I may have a follow-up, depending on what Al asked.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lady, the reservoir restriction, 28,000 acre feet, obviously is going to depend on the hydrologic conditions. And I don't know if this is a question or a request, but I think it would be a good idea for Reclamation to make a presentation to the space holders and to the board to explain what the hydrologic conditions are, where the reservoir restriction of 28,000 acre feet would have an impact on the ability to store water, because we all know that Anderson doesn't fill every year as it is. And so there may be some years where 28,000 has no effect. And so I think it would be really important for Reclamation to share with the board and the space holder what are the circumstances. Because I think if we know what the circumstances are, you may get some suggestions either from the board or from the space holders about a way to provide mitigation under those types of circumstances. And so I would just hope that you would reach out and as soon as you can reasonably make those kind of presentations, because I think that you're going to get some help. May not be help you want, but you would definitely get some help.
Thank you, Mr. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I do have a question. Laney, you did say that you had agreed with the Corps on a deviation for the water control manual for this situation. And I don't I don't have the water, I don't have the MOUs in front of me today, but it was my impression that when there was going to be changes or deviations from the water control manual, there needed to be at the least a consultation and perhaps even concurrence of the Boise project, who was a partner in that water control manual process. And as to my knowledge, there hasn't been an outreach to the Boise project about that. So is there a plan for that to be communicated to the project?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Barker. So on both points, I appreciate your recognition that the reservoir restriction plays out in multiple ways given the hydrologic conditions. So most certainly that is a key part of the planning for our mitigation plan. And I really couldn't agree with you more about the value of speaking with our space holders and you, the board, for ideas and thoughts about where those opportunities are for mitigation, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, what in fact is truly valuable to work through that period. So absolutely commit to those presentations and those discussions. When it comes to the water control manual specifically, absolutely can reach out to the Boise project, make sure that we're sharing that analysis on which the request for deviation has founded and get meaningful input as we move forward there. So I will take that as a follow-up action to reach out to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I think we're good, Lainey. Did you have anything else for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will just quickly wrap up by noting that some key aspects of our work as we look towards the rest of the year is really bringing in all of the information that we've been gathering over the course of the year and a half, and that is to ensure that we have a full picture of our proposed action for environmental compliance. And again, as I've mentioned before, we are intending to publish a supplemental draft environmental impact statement later this year. Again, lots of work coming on. We are very much looking to keep on that schedule. There is a lot to wrestle in and dial in on that effort. So I will keep the board informed on schedule as we're meeting that, or if there is any need to adjust schedules in that. Again, really trying to keep our eye on having a final environmental impact statement and record of decision in 2024. So that those are the key next steps that I wanted to share with you all. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you this morning.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for taking the time to meet with us. Oh, you got a couple of questions.
Yeah, just a quick one, Laney.
Right.
Chairman Laney. Have you calculated would the new space have filled this year?
Oh, meaning where we landed operationally in
Yeah,
Anderson?
would the 29,000 have filled this year with the, or have you calculated that?
Oh, Mr. Olmstead, we have not taken a look at that calculation, but I think that is a great idea to, as we look into our analysis again, what are those different hydrologic scenarios we would need to account for? A year like this would represent one of those years where the system fills, and we would want to understand what that means from a potential shortfall. Thank you.
Okay, Al, do you have a
Yeah,
follow-up?
Mr. Chairman, just one tangential question, if I may. Lainey, can you fill us in on whether or not Reclamation and Cat Creek have come to an understanding about their funding your studies so that they can continue their project evaluation?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Barker, for that question. So as Reclamation continues to work with Cat Creek under our Lease of Power Privilege program, we are in a moment now where the project is on pause from Reclamation's point of view. And as we've shared publicly, the Lease of Power Privilege program is one that is funded by project proponents. So we are at a moment where we're waiting for that next installment of funding. And then I want to recognize the partnership, of course, in that joint jurisdiction with the Federal Energy Regulatory Committee, FERC. And they have also in parallel put the project in abeyance until that moment where we're able to move forward with funding.
Mr. Chairman, in short, we don't have funding yet from Cat Creek, so nothing's happening on the expense, right?
Yes, Mr. Barker.
Okay, any other questions? All right, Lainey, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for taking time to give us an update today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the board.
Okay, all right, Cynthia?
Mr. Chairman, the only thing I wanted to add was that at the last board meeting, we had discussed the possibility of scheduling a storage committee meeting to discuss some of these details and possibly have reclamation give a more detailed presentation about the 30% design. Given that we have, I think, even more information since that date, I'll just offer that I'll coordinate with Mr. Olmstead to schedule that meeting and determine what board members are most interested in hearing at this point, including some of the work that we've been doing to try to develop options for stakeholder or space holder contracts, that sort of thing for the board's new water supply.
Okay, Brian?
Mr. Chairman, Cynthia Orlaney, so I know you were looking at some sources in May for riprap and fill material. Did you, do you think those are going to work? Or do you not know yet? The close by sources, Laney, or the sources that were used in the original dam?
Cynthia, if it's all right, I'll go ahead and respond to that question. Thanks, Mr. Olmstead, Mr. Chairman. So this, the source material for both materials for the dam raise and in particular riprap for projects around the RIM project has actually been a quite large part of our study and analysis and was a huge topic of discussion during the value engineering studies themselves. So I think what I am able to share is that we have really dug into understanding the type of riprap, the size, for example, and where sources may be that can meet the engineering needs. All of that to be said, it is still an active conversation. So this project, both with the dam raise and the RIM projects, will have a great need for source material, especially riprap, and we haven't completely dialed that in. So there's just thoughtful discussions going on across all components of the project to dial that in. And if I could add, I apologize to jump in there after, and in thinking about that economical way to accomplish that.
Okay. Okay, I think that we're good.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
Cynthia. Okay. Next on the agenda, cloud seeding.
Cloud seeding. And Cynthia, were you gonna give an intro or are we gonna jump right to Kayla?
I think we can jump right to Kayla.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Kayla, welcome.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Can you all hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Okay, sweet. I'm just going to share my screen here with a memo that was included in your board materials. So I'm going to try and be fairly concise today. What I'm going to be covering today are some budget items that I'm requesting authorization for the cloud seeding program. And the majority of these budget items I'm asking for at this time due to the timeliness of getting these projects going. So a few weeks ago at our cloud seeding committee, I went over with the board sort of a crash course or a state of the program on where everything is at. I walked through a number of different projects and different topics the board is going to have to consider for this program. And so one of the things that I did cover was the need for modeling and computing. So most of our board projects, including planning, development, assessments, any sort of feasibility and design, we rely on these WRF models for all of those types of work for the cloud seeding program. And to date, the board has cost shared with a lot of the model development with Idaho Power for our existing collaborative program. However, as the state moves forward with its own cloud seeding operations or projects beyond its partnership with the current collaborative, it's going to have to start, the board is going to have to start thinking about some of these costs to support modeling and computing and other aspects of the program. So I'm just going to walk through these one by one, these different items that we're asking for today. So the first item that I have on here for you is going to be the development of a statewide calibration of the WRF hydro model. And Mr. Chairman, at our cloud seeding committee, Mr. Barker did have some questions on this work as to whether or not the statewide approach versus a basin by basin, what are some of the nuances between doing that? And so very briefly, the WRF hydro model is used to support, largely we use this model to support assessments. And so In the long term, we will need the wharf hydro model to support both planning operations and assessments in basins beyond the collaborative basin. And so what NCAR has recommended is that instead of doing basin by basin calibration, so for example, calibrating the Bear and then calibrating the Lemhi and then calibrating whatever basins the board decides to move to next, that it would be more cost efficient to just do a statewide calibration of the model. That way, as the board moves forward into these new basins, we will have these modeling technologies available. And the benefit of that is that the wharf hydro model, specifically this hydrologic model, is one that can be used for things beyond cloud seeding. So one of the aspects that our IDWR hydrology staff had mentioned that this could possibly be used for is looking at stream flow in basins where we don't have data. And so what this work is setting up to do is to calibrate an entire wharf hydro model to the entire state of Idaho. And what this does is calibrate this model to the availability of localized data. And then in the regions where we do not have localized data, NCAR has a regional model parameterization. So basically what it does is look at the terrain and the climatology of the different basins where we don't have basins, and it will calibrate it to a basin with similar climatology and terrain. And so overall, this effort is estimated to take 2 years. NCAR is thinking they can get this work started in October, and it will take approximately it will cost approximately $750,000 over the course of 2 years to do this. And so I've noted down here in each of these topics, what is the benefit to the state? Why are we paying into this? Well, we obviously, as you are aware, we have interest in knowing, what's the benefit, what's the impact of cloud seeding. And to do that, or to be able to understand that in new basins as we move forward, we're going to have to develop these modeling technologies to be able to answer those questions. And so I did put, just for your reference, some costs in here. So it cost us roughly $230,000 to calibrate the Boise, the Wood, and the Upper Snake and Payette River Basin. And the Boise, Wood, and Payette are being done sort of in a regional approach. And going back, Mr. Barker, to your question from the cloud seeding committee, sort of what's the difference between this and doing the state, the basin by basin? And I did take that question back to NCAR, and their response is, well, they are still doing a basin by basin approach. However, what they're doing with this work is essentially setting up an automation so that this model can start calibrating these basins more efficiently, as opposed to their work setting up this calibration work one at a time as we move into these basins. And so that's largely the efficiency and why they're proposing to do this on a statewide versus moving forward doing this project by project. So Mr. Chairman, that is the first budget item. I'll stop right there and see if there's any questions on this one.
Any questions for Kayla? Okay. Were there some economies of scale when you did the Boise, Wood, Upper Snake, and Payette together, even though it was basin by basin, that achieved that cost of $230,000? Whereas if you were just going to do the Bear or the Lemhi, the cost might be more than a fourth of that number, for example.
I'm going to take a stab at answering that as best as I can, but the Boise, Wood, Payette, we operate them regionally as well. So when they're doing these regional calibrations, I think the concept is looking at it on a regional basis, or doing this work on a regional basis, as opposed to more micro scale, if you will, as the basin by basin, yes, does include or does create efficiencies.
Okay, just to follow up, by my math, if it was proportionate for each of those basins, we could do quite a few basins individually before we hit $750,000. But perhaps long-term, having the statewide model would provide the best bang for the buck. I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, I will also add that, our existing basins, a lot of this work is sort of ongoing and spin up as a part of our collaborative program. So some of these costs, and I can't say for 100%, but some of these costs may be reduced because NCAR has already put significant work into this model as we've moved forward in these basins. So we're moving into other basins. These are going to be, areas where this model has never touched before, and that could be a considerable portion of these costs is just setting up the model to do other regions.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? We can continue, Kayla. I'm sorry to throw a monkey wrench. in your
No, that's okay. That's all right, Mr. Chairman. All right, so the next one that I have on here is another modeling expenditure. And this one is one that I may request some feedback from you all on whether or not you would like to move forward with this at this time. So the second budget item I have for you is an expansion of WRF weather mod. So this is the cloud seeding component of the model. WRF weather mod is used for planning, model development, assessments, feasibility and designs. This is essentially the first of its kind cloud seeding model that NCAR has been working on. And so currently this model's domain is set up only for the collaborative program. And same thing, we're going to have to expand that domain to be able to support operations in the Bear and the Lemhi River basins. And so since we've already entered into feasibility and design studies for these basins, we have asked NCAR to start considering what it would cost us to set up the modeling to be able to support these basins, because there is going to be some lead time to get these models developed and set up before we can even consider operations in these basins. And so this work, what they're proposing is the cost will be $210,000. And what that work will do is expand the model domain across the Lemhi and the Bear River basins. This is the cloud seeding model again. And this will allow our operators to be able to utilize this model for operations in the Lemhi and Bear River basins as well. This work also includes some updates to the model to allow it to run across multiple domains. So that's not something that it currently does, but when we're looking at like domains for our collaborative or domains for other areas, that is something that they're going to have to update this model to be able to do so that we can run operations across multiple domains. So two different aspects of work in this, $210,000. Again, this work is to expand the cloud seeding model to be able to utilize it for operations in the Lemhi and the Bear. And the reason, Mr. Chairman, I am proposing this at this time is because NCAR is becoming quite popular. Many states and other entities are requesting project work. And so you'll notice on the timeline that I've noted here that this work wouldn't begin until 2024. And so we are looking forward. And the reason I'm looking for some feedback from you all today is because the board has not yet made any official determinations to set up operations in these basins. However, if this is something that the board is going to wish to consider, there is going to be lead up time to get this modeling work done. And so we've asked NCAR what that's going to cost and how long it's going to take and when they can start on it. And the long and short is it will take them about 6 months, they feel like, to get it set up for both the Lemhi and the Bear. And they would not be able to start that until January of 2024. So Mr. Chairman, I'll stop right there and take any questions or feedback on this one.
Board members, questions for Kayla? We seem to be happy, Kayla.
Okay, great. Well, I will move on then. So the next aspect of this is going to be the instrumentation. So our models, to be anywhere close to accurate, are going to have good data, as you are aware. And so for our existing program, our current collaborative operations is supported by a network of different weather instruments. During some of our investigative, like Snowy, for example, we've had a number of different instruments out to support data collection for modeling as well. And so today I am proposing for you all, actually, before I move on to the instrumentation, I got this a little out of order, I'm sorry. So before we move on to the instrumentation, Mr. Chairman, I apologize, I'm going to take a step back. So the modeling and computing, modeling, as you're aware, does require significant computing to support those models. Back in 2019, the board did partner with Idaho Power Company to purchase some computing space. However, back in 2019, none of our current board projects, for example, the Lemhi, the Bear, some of our assessments, the statewide, none of these modeling projects were contemplated at that time when we purchased this HPC. And so what we have found is that through a number of these different projects, that has been a significant limiting factor. Is the availability of computing space. We're finding that we need more beyond what we have in our shared space. with Idaho Power. And so staff are requesting at this time authorization to utilize $100,000 to support computing needs across various different projects. And so this could be the purchase of cloud-based computing, otherwise known as AWS. This could be for other types of computing to purchase more infrastructure for our existing computer. But we would like to just set aside $100,000 right now so that staff have access to some funding to support computing for these various different modeling needs. So Mr. Chairman, I'll stop right there and ask if there's any questions on this one. This one is sort of an open-ended funding, but staff are not entirely sure where we're going to need computing space right now as we're working through these projects.
Questions? Mr. Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You make reference to the Falcon system. Can you talk about that just a little bit? I don't understand.
Yeah.
The system that we rent, or do we need to buy, or what's the story there?
No, I apologize. I should clarify a little bit further on that. So I guess for context, so we refer to the HPC that we purchased with Idaho Power as BORA. That's the name of the HPC. So we share BORA with Idaho Power. BORA is actually a shared computer between us, Idaho Power, BSU, and INL. And so with BORA, each BSU, INL, and Idaho Power / board get a certain amount of space on this. And so the Idaho Power and the board space, we're finding between our operations and other research efforts, we're not having enough space. So then we have the Falcon computer. Falcon is another high-powered computer. It is a shared computing space that is owned by BSU. It was a federally gifted HPC that is only to be used for public entities and for research purposes. So Idaho Power, for example, does not have access to this computer. The downside of this Falcon HPC is that we're not the only public entity shooting for computing time on this. So it's priority based, which can be limiting for us and can be significant impact to our project timeline. But it is a potential resource that we have. We have been working with BSU to identify how much space we might have on that computer. And so staff are still working to understand that at that time. There would not be cost absent administration for the Falcon computer because it is a public resource. So the board may have to share in some administration costs for that computer. But as of right now, our staff's understanding is that that is a public resource that the board would be able to use some computing space on. So that would potentially provide some cost efficiencies as opposed to purchasing cloud-based computing space.
Go ahead.
Kayla, how is the cost for storage calculated?
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Cole-Hansen, that is honestly something I cannot answer. It's widely varying. It's different for like the HPC versus cloud-based computing. So you have costs for storage as well as running the models on the computer. And I'm honestly not entirely sure how those storage costs are calculated. There is also two different types of storage. So there's cold storage if you don't need it right now. And then there's like warm storage, or essentially if you're just going to be storing files short term. So those costs can vary widely depending on how you're using the computer or how you're storing.
Okay, so Kayla, what if Bora is overloaded? We can't use it. Somebody else gets the space on Falcon. Where's the next HPC?
So the next option, and the one that we are utilizing right now, for example, on the cloud seeding analysis project, is called AWS, or cloud-based computing. So cloud-based, we have found it works much faster. It's basically infinite availability because it is cloud-based. However, it can be more costly. So that is a resource that we will always have, is the AWS, and we are currently running, I think we're spending about $50,000 to utilize AWS for a portion of the cloud seeding analysis project. But that is the basically worst case or most expensive option. However, the plus, as I mentioned to that, is it's much faster computing.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Olmstead.
Mr. Chairman, are we in the adjacent basins that are, I guess, sort of partnering? Are they going to be sharing this data, or are they going to be sharing some of these expenses, or Or is this, we're just modeling for our side of the divides or whatever?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Olmstead, so to date, only the Water Resource Board and Idaho Power are the only ones who've cost shared on any of the modeling components. As the board moves forward with some of these other basins, that is something that it may wish to consider, is having some of our future potential partners share in some of these costs. But to date, these have been solely absorbed by the board and Idaho Power Company.
Thank you.
Dean,
Mr. Chairman, Kayla. So on these, are there going to be what are going to be the ongoing costs of this, of these computers? Is this going to be kind of annually, we're going to have to look for this, or once we get some of these basins modeled, is that going to be over? Is there going to be like care and feeding of the model? I mean, what's the down the road look like for costs?
Mr. Chairman, Dean, that's a great question. So there is actually ongoing cost. So Bora, and we were made aware of this when we purchased Bora. So these high power computers, just like any desktop computer, they have a shelf life. So the shelf life for most HPCs is 5 to 7 years. So we are already anticipating that even with our Bora system come 2025, between 2025, 2027, that we are going to need to look at either purchasing a new computer or updating or adding to the existing computer that we have. Ongoing on an annual basis, we do pay administration costs for this computer. Those are about $80,000 total, and we split that with Idaho Power for our existing program. I don't know if those costs will be reflective moving forward of HPC administration, but right now about $80,000 is the ongoing for the Bora HPC. And then AWS would be project contingent.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're good on this end, Kayla, if you want to continue.
Okay. All right, awesome. Well, now I will move down to the instrumentation portion of it. So the next item that I have on here for you, Mr. Chairman, I'm requesting about $450,000 for the deployment and post-processing of weather radar data. And so what we are proposing to do, NCAR has a weather radar data, if you can say that 10 times faster. They have a weather radar that they are willing to put together and bring out into the field here in Idaho. And so these costs would be to set up this radar, deploy it in Idaho, collect data over the winter season of 2023, 2024. And then these costs as well include some post-processing and analysis of data. And so this weather radar would support a number of different objectives for this program. The first one, and the reason that we're targeting for this winter, would be the pre-investigation for liquid propane. And so I had briefly talked about this at our cloud seeding committee. Liquid propane is another type of seeding or another type of seeding agent that has been demonstrated to work in lab setting. It can work at warmer temperatures. However, it does have some different physical properties than silver iodide. And so those different physical properties are things that have never been studied in a field setting. And so what staff are proposing to do is to set up an investigation, if you will, or a pre-investigation to be able to look at a more comprehensive investigation of liquid propane. And so there are other states and public entities, other universities that are interested in looking at a larger comprehensive study. For our purposes, understanding a cheaper and potentially more cost-effective form of cloud seeding may be of interest to the board, and that's partially why I am proposing this. So the other aspect of this weather radar data, this is something that at least our technical staff has long been considering and discussing with Idaho Power. Weather radars are used to set up spatial and temporal data within the model. So they are needed to basically help the model show us where water is across the basin. So right now, when we're conducting operations, we see this weather coming in, but by the time it hits the basin, we don't really have the resources or the tools to see where that water is within the basins in real time. And so it does provide for some inefficiencies, and that's a reason in the long term that we've been considering getting a radar. However, the long-term cost of a radar operationally can be quite expensive. And so some of those options in the long term that we've considered with Idaho Power are potentially one, purchasing a radar which may be cost prohibited because radars are anywhere from $1 to $1.5 million a piece. And then you have the annual operations and maintenance costs for those. A second option for our weather radars in the future to support the larger network for the program could be a radar network. And this is something that has been set up in other states. And essentially what it is there is a company or an organization that has come together with partially federal funding, and they come in and they install these radars, and then we, the state or other entities, can essentially pay for a service. And that service right now is estimated to be about $75,000 a year per radar. And so this is something in the long term, you know, we're still considering how we can get this radar and this instrumentation to be able to better set up the model. In the long term, this will also help us with the model and our understanding of the impacts. But for right now, we are proposing to bring in NCAR's radar. This will give us a cost-effective option to get some of this radar data into the model. It will also give us an option to help us set up the pre-investigation for liquid propane. So for liquid propane to be able to set up a comprehensive investigation, we first have to be able to identify a test site. So where are we going to study it at? And there has to be a certain, you know, terrain, climatology, different parameters that have to be met for us to study that. And so what we are proposing with this radar this winter is to also use that radar to decide on a test site for a longer term investigation that would likely be partnered with multiple other states and other entities. Utah, their staff for sure have already started participating in these discussions, and Utah does have funding for propane research as well. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to stop right here on this one. Again, this one is $450,000 for a weather radar. This would be for NCAR to bring in this radar next winter and then conduct post-processing of that data as well.
Questions for Kayla? So this would be as similar as those mobile units that they moved in when we did the test
The Snowy.
5 years ago, Snowy, yeah.
Yes, they're similar. They're not as quite as fancy bells and whistles as the Doppler radars, but very similar. Yes, it'll come in on a trailer, be a large structure like that.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay,
Okay.
that's all you need, or have you got another one? Oh, you got another
I've
one.
got one more. It's the last one. And then I'll
Okay.
give you a snapshot of this budget. So the last one I have on here is for the for LES modeling. And so really the purpose of this is that, you know, understanding the topography and the precipitation of a region is really important to be able to set up a study and to be able to understand, you know, how cloud seeding works in an operational setting. So we've talked with NCAR, you know, back and forth about, you know, the different resources and data that we would need to set up this investigation. And one of the things that they recommended was conducting some modeling over the next couple of years that can help us better understand liquid propane and how it changes phases, if you will, or basically how it affects or how it nucleates ice in a natural setting. So this is not something that, you know, the current WRF models are set up to do. This is not something that we've set up the models to do in any setting, really. And so what we are proposing to do is to run some live eddy simulations, or LES, and these are, again, a type of high resolution modeling. These will help us to better understand the cloud structure, the phases, the precipitation process, and the distribution of precipitation over time. And so again, this is again to help us with the liquid propane and our understanding of how this could be efficient or effective in our existing programs. So NCAR would be looking to set up these simulations over the Little Camas Prairie and in East Idaho near Driggs. And the reason that we've chosen these two locations is because they generally have good terrain and conditions from what we know about liquid propane to conduct this investigation. So those are the two regions that we would be looking at to collect data and to be run investigations for liquid propane. And in the long term, we would take this data and utilize it to better understand how we could use liquid propane in other areas of the state to either enhance our existing programs or to support cloud seeding in basins where silver iodide may not work. So this cost is $465,000. This is over 2 years. And this work would start in October of 2023 and go through October of 2025. Mr. Chairman, that is the last one that I have for you today.
Okay, any questions on that phase for Kayla? Al?
Mr. Chairman, Kayla, on that liquid propane LES modeling, is there somebody else around the country who's doing this? It sounds kind of like R&D work at a pretty, I don't know, beginning level, as opposed to applying it to what we already know about it to our basins. Am I misunderstanding that, or is it?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Barker, so to my knowledge, to date, we are sort of leading the way in terms of this effort, you know, in our drive to, I guess, basically understand liquid propane. There is certainly other entities interested in it. But yes, this work is sort of new and up and coming, if you will, yes.
Follow up, Kayla. So we're partnering with NCAR, so we don't have any, it's not proprietary to the Idaho Water Resource Board. If we spend this money, it becomes part of the public domain, what we learn.
That is correct.
Okay,
Mr. Chair.
Joanne.
Kayla, focusing back on the storage, which is the least expensive item in your request, but you did mention that we'll probably have to buy or upgrade the HPC in a couple of years. And not knowing much about the HPC, is it like a typical computer where when you get a new model, there's more storage included?
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Cole-Hansen, and so that is really how much computing space is really subject to the user and how much you want to buy. And so obviously when we purchase our next computing space, we will be or our next computer, we will be considering you know, maybe purchasing additional space or what our project's needs may be in the future. But yeah, I think hopefully, does that answer your question?
Yes, well, I guess I'm wondering if maybe we could defer if we have an opportunity to defer the additional storage. Especially if we outsource it to the cloud until we know when we're going to replace the HPC or upgrade it and get more storage with that.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay, so Mr. Chairman, Ms. Cole-Hansen, so the computing support that I'm requesting right now, the $100,000, this is actually to support existing projects. So this could be our cloud seeding analysis. This could be the LEM-high feasibility and design study. This could be some of the statewide investigations that's going on. So this is actually a current and immediate need to have computing space right now for our existing projects. But we are working with Idaho Power staff to try and understand what our future needs are going to be, both for the collaborative program. So our existing HPC, I guess I should be clear on this. So when we purchase space on the Bora, we purchase space, half of the space that's on there is for operations. And so that space must be designated during the cloud seeding season only for operations. And then half of the space that we purchased with Idaho Power can be for research. And so that's the half, the research space that we're running into issues with. We've utilized quite a bit of that over the last year and a half. Idaho Power does have their own interest in using some of that as well. And they have actually moved forward on their own with adding some additional space for their efforts. But in the future, I'm not sure what that may look like for us. We're still sort of working to sort out, you know, what our long-term needs may be based on how the board would like to move forward with this program.
That's your question.
Yes.
Just to clarify, when you talk about space, you're talking about really user time to use the computer, not storage, right?
I'm talking about both, Mr. Chairman, yes. So there's computing storage to store data, and then there is computing time to actually run the models. And so both are space limited.
Okay. Any other questions for Kayla?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Dean.
It comes back to the research for the liquid propane. I mean, is this liquid propane possibility, is it like a game changer? I mean, is it a really big potential for increasing our ability to cloud seed? When you mentioned lower temperatures or higher temperatures you could seed in. So I guess, is this really the next thing? What is it?
Mr. Chairman, Dean, it's hard to say. I think that there's a lot of research that still needs to be done with liquid propane. I think we're pretty confident because it's been demonstrating in a lab setting that it can work. We just don't know how well it can work operationally. So we know that silver iodide can be expensive. We know that propane is cheaper to operate, but because of some of the physical aspects of it, so liquid propane, for example, it doesn't rely on orographic lift or winds going over the mountaintop to carry seeding material into a cloud. Liquid propane generators have to be placed in cloud because they nucleate ice right when that propane comes out the nozzle. So that difference in physical characteristics, that may or may not be the new best thing, or it may be the next best thing for some areas, but not for others. And so we're not really looking at it as sort of the next best thing to replace silver iodide. But really an enhancement, because we've seen warming trends in our climatology, whether, what's the cause of that is to be left out there. But we do know that we're seeing warming trends. We do know that liquid propane can generate ice at warmer temperatures. So it may be, it may not be, but at this point in time, there simply just isn't the research to answer that question.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Kayla? Are you going to share a resolution with us now, or are you going to do that tomorrow?
I can walk you through the resolution tomorrow. So it'll be each of these budget items that I've walked you through today, Mr. Chairman, but there is one last item on there that I would like to briefly just touch on today before we go over that tomorrow. So what I have before you on the screen right now and what I've included in your board materials is a snapshot of where this funding will be coming from, just for your knowledge. Sorry, I'm having a malfunction here, pause. But the last item on the resolution, if I can get this to pull up. Sorry. Resolution. Okay. And so this is going to be starting on line number 36. And so, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Cole-Hansen is the chair of the Finance Committee. You had recommended that all of our cloud seeding funds beyond operations and maintenance costs require authorization from the full board for expenditure. And so what I have put in this resolution is that I have requested from you all that the remainder of the cloud seeding funds may be authorized for expenditure, however, subject to the cloud seeding committee instead of the full board. And the reason that staff are requesting that right now is given the number of topics that the board has going on, and it may be more efficient for staff to move forward with some of these projects with getting cloud seeding, or excuse me, funding authorization from the committee as opposed to the full board. So I'm going to leave that there if there's any items for discussion or if you'd like to comment on that, but that is the one thing in the resolution that that I have not covered yet today.
Any questions on that?
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
As the Finance Committee Chair, I'm fine with that so long as it's the costs are less than the budget.
We could probably tweak that resolution to indicate that, I think.
I think we can do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, anything else, Kayla? That's all.
Mr. Chairman, that's all I had for you. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time this morning, and hopefully you don't have a deer in the headlights yet.
Oh, we're doing fine. Okay, all right, we're good to go.
Good to go.
Aging infrastructure?
Yeah, Neely will give a update on where we're at with the aging infrastructure.
Welcome, Neely. Try not to distract you while you're getting your presentation up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Oh, I haven't shared yet. There we go. This should be a quick update. There's no action needed at this time. This is really just to remind you of the to accomplish over the last year related to aging infrastructure, and then to lay out at least your plans for this year and for next. You'll recall, the Idaho legislature appropriated 25 million during its 2022 session to be used to improve aging water infrastructure. The board held 2 funding rounds in fiscal year 2023. Using a criteria that was developed by staff, received public comment, and then was adopted by the board. The first round was awarded on September 16th. That authorized $12.5 million for 12 aging infrastructure projects throughout Idaho. And here you can see them on the table on the screen. I'm not going to read all these off, but you can see the total project costs are about $55 million, and there's the $12.5 million that was budgeted for that round. Then again, on January 20th, 2023, the board authorized another resolution. This was round 2, authorizing another $12.5 million for aging infrastructure projects. And this was for 18 projects throughout Idaho. You can see these projects here on the screen. And again, this is surprisingly at about $55 million as well in total project costs. And again, the $12.5 million budget. During the 2023 session, the legislature appropriated an additional $50 million to the board to be used for aging water infrastructure grants. This past May 2023, the board set a new timeline for soliciting applications. Those applications, the first round is due, applications are due by August 4th. And that would be for a total of $12.5 million statewide. And then a second round this fiscal year would be have applications due on December 1. And that would again be for $12.5 million. So a total of $25 million this year. And then I believe the board is anticipating potentially holding another couple rounds next year for the same 12.5 and 12.5, but that's to be determined. But that was the plan that was discussed. So that's kind of what's coming up immediately. We're getting ready to receive those applications and looking forward to reviewing those. The other things I just wanted to highlight here is that we have recently updated the board's aging infrastructure grant program webpage. And we've started to add project profiles for some of the projects that have been, the work is underway or it's been completed. And here you can see some of those. These are hyperlinked in your materials, so you should be able to click on those and view those profiles. I'm not going to pull them up here. The goal is to have a profile like this developed for all the projects that you guys funded. These are developed primarily through Steve Dubner. And then lastly here we have, I just wanted to highlight that we have developed a financial program statistic page that includes statistics about the grant and loan program. And additionally, we've developed an Esri map with grant and loan locations. So if you click on these links, you can explore some of those, but I'm not going to use up too much time here. And I just would highlight that the grant timeline that I talked about in this presentation is attached to this memo. I'm not going to pull it up, but it's attached in your materials. So with that, I would stand for any questions.
Any questions for Neely? Brian?
Neely, what is the next deadline then?
Mr. Chairman, Board Member Olmstead, the next round is applications are due Friday, August 4th. So it's coming up fast.
Okay.
And then again, the second round is December 1st.
Neely, just one clarification in your presentation. I think the legislature authorized us not to exceed $50 million. It's an up to kind of a thing, not.
That's right. That's correct.
Instruction to spend 50.
I should have been more clear in that. So
No,
yes.
I just wanted the audience to understand that that's what we were told to do. Okay, anything else? Okay, thank you very much. Anybody want a break? Break time? Okay. I think everybody, we'll take 5, 10.
Got some bad juju going on in the computer there, Mario.
it kept going. Yeah. And when it did, there was no and then it would switch back. So when it switched back, you had to hurry to do something.
Okay, Mr. Patton, I think we're back online. Are we recording again, Jennifer? Okay, we're ready to reconvene the work session. Next on the agenda is the proposed Dvorak Clearwater pipeline. And we have
Jeff Allen.
Allen.
Jeff is one of the Idaho's representatives to the Northwest Power Planning Council. So he's here to talk to us about the background behind this proposed pipeline project.
Thank you for being here today.
You bet. Brian gave me the invitation to come up and be his opening act. He even told me how to dress. He said, brown pants, blue shirt. Don't take too much time or I'll bench press you when it's all over. So I'm here just to give you a real brief introduction on, in some cases, reintroduction on this proposed pipeline. In April of 2019, Governor Little convened what he called a salmon working group. And they were tasked with providing the governor with recommendations, what the state could do to help our salmon and steelhead stocks. Ultimately, 21 individuals were appointed to this working group. I saw one of them in the room earlier. John Simpson was on that body, and Scott, who's in the audience, had a major role in getting that up and off the ground in his past life. Ultimately, there were 16 meetings stretched out over a year and a half, and it concluded in December of 2020. And they provided Governor Little with 29 recommendations, grouped in the categories that you'd suspect: habitat, harvest, hydropower, blocked areas, predation, and also hatcheries. And we're here to talk to you today about one of the recommendations coming out of the hatchery group of recommendations. It's worth noting that of the 29 recommendations, some of them were for things that the state was currently doing. So the recommendation was continue to fund this important work or continue to do this important work. This one here would be something brand new, something that that's not ongoing, but could make a real significant difference. We have 2 hatcheries up there in this vicinity, one managed by the state and one managed by the Nez Perce tribe. Neither of these hatcheries receive enough water. Both of them have empty raceways. If we can get the water needed to these 2 hatcheries, it'd be the equivalent of opening up a brand new hatchery. We could raise over 3 million smolts. And depending on ocean conditions and other circumstances, that many smolts could result in as many as 10 to 12,000 more adults coming back to the state of Idaho. By way of comparison, right now, I just checked the web, and we've got a little over 50,000 that have made it up over Lower Grand so far this year. And that's really close to the 10-year average at this point of the year. So we're talking about a sizable increase. It would be one of the first times the state of Idaho has ever used general fund dollars to fund work for salmon habitat. To date, ratepayers from Bonneville Power Administration and federal entities have spent a lot of money on salmon and steelhead recovery. And the state has done a lot of things, but usually we've been doing it with someone else's dollars. So this is an idea. As you know, the legislature appropriated some money. And if Brian can get all the planets to align and make this happen, that would spend some of those dollars. So that's really the genesis of how it came to be. I can tell you that Governor Little did accept the 29 recommendations. I have been in his office to talk about said recommendations many times, and invariably in every single meeting, this pipeline has come up. So the interest level remains very high. Brian, did I miss anything that you wanted covered before you walk through the nuts and bolts of the actual pipeline?
I think that covers it.
Okay, I'll hang out for any questions after Brian's presentation. Thank you.
Okay. I will talk a little bit about what the proposal looks like and what our current cost estimate looks like, Mr. Chairman. If we go to the next slide, Jennifer. Thank you. Okay, so this is an air photo map of the vicinity. Of course, Dvorak Dam right here. The two fish hatcheries are located down here. The fish hatchery operated by the state is located here. And the fish hatchery operated by the Nez Perce tribe is located here on this bank. The line shown in blue, the light blue and the dark blue, is the existing pipeline that feeds the hatchery that is operated by the state of Idaho. Okay, the hatchery operated by the Nez Perce tribe actually pumps water out of the river for their water supply. The proposal that was included in the recommendations that Jeff Allen just talked about is to build a second pipeline shown here in yellow on the other bank of the river, and that to supply the hatchery that is operated by the state of Idaho. The idea is that would be a bit of an upsized pipeline, maybe a 42-inch pipeline. The existing pipeline system is a 36, and thereby provide more water to the Clearwater hatchery that's operated by the state, and then take the existing pipeline system and repurpose it to deliver water to the hatchery operated by the Nez Perce tribe. And then there would be a little bit of retrofit of upsizing a pipeline to go into the hatchery operated by the Nez Perce tribe. So this is generally the plan that the state of Idaho has put forward, and is basically shopping to all the other partners or potential partners in this that would be involved in this project. Any questions there so far about the layout?
Questions?
Right.
Dean?
After remembering our trip last year, how much life is left in that existing pipe?
The existing pipe is about 30 years old.
It's steel, isn't it?
It is yes, it's a mortar lined steel pipeline. Yes.
It's line.
Okay, yeah, line.
It's not, yeah, I'm not sure I know the exact answer of how much life is in it, but it's not like gonna.
It's not
expire
imminently
here.
gonna come apart. Okay.
Okay, next slide, please, Jennifer. So, as you know, the governor's pretty excited about this proposal, as Jeff talked about. And we got the phone call, asking, can we help out with, planning this thing and looking at what those cost estimates might look like. So our team of engineers went to work and came up with this cost estimate. We've gone through a couple iterations of this cost estimate so far. But this is the current cost estimate, current as of maybe about 2 months ago, including all the various components to a new pipeline system. Of note, I do want to note that it does include another small powerhouse. As you know, the existing pipeline system contains a small powerhouse that, in fact, this board owns and has owned and operated for 20 years now, 23 years actually. The proposal as it's currently laid out by the state would include another small powerhouse on that other pipeline system, and would bring it to a total construction cost of just under $70 million. Next slide, please. One of the things we did want to look at is whether the powerhouse would be a net positive or a net negative. It looks like it would probably be a net positive, but it's getting pretty close there. The total cost of building it's about $9 million. And you would generate maybe $17 million over the course of 30 years at current price levels. Factoring in operations and capital replacement, you're looking at maybe a $6 million net positive that would be offset that initial construction cost.
Ryan, just to clarify, you used present value of power. There's no escalators in there.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. We did use a present value of power. And is that the last slide, Jennifer?
Yes.
Okay. So with that, either Jeff or I will be happy to answer any further questions that the board may have.
Board members, start over here with Mark.
Mr. Chairman, Ryan, I should have asked it earlier, but what's the length of the pipe? Just curious.
oh gosh. 1.5 miles, maybe 1.8 miles.
Okay, Dale,
Brian, who would own and operate the hydropower and the dam structure part of it, for the hatchery?
Okay. Can we go back to the map? please? That's an interesting question that requires just a little bit of explanation. When we look at what's there currently, the pipeline system is actually owned by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. This board owns the small generating plant right there. The hatcheries are both owned by the federal government, one operated by the state of Idaho, one operated by the Nez Perce tribe. The decisions over who would own and operate the new pipeline and the new hydropower system are still probably ongoing. As it is, the thinking is that the state of Idaho may own that pipeline and power generation system. But there's, obviously negotiations with the other partners still yet to take place.
Will the board have any role here?
I think the board will have a large role as this project goes forward.
Okay.
we will be responsible, especially if anything goes wrong. Ryan,
Mr. Chairman, Brian, so the new pipe, is there already a pipe through the dam, or how do you get the pipe there to the pump?
Yeah, there's, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Olmstead, there's actually 2 empty penstocks already through the dam. So I think the plan would be to hook into one of those empty penstocks.
Dean,
So with this new pipe, what's our capacity? How many CFS we run through the existing pipe?
The existing pipe can run about 89 CFS. The plan would be to build a new pipe at 125 CFS.
Okay, so bigger to,
Right. And that would fully water up the Clearwater hatchery and provide the Dvorak hatchery. It wouldn't bring them to full capacity, but it would give them a lot more than they have now.
Mr. Chairman,
yeah,
would the tribes operated hatchery use the same amount of flow that going through there now, the 89 CFS?
I'm going to ask Jeff to answer that question.
Yeah, under the proposal that Brian's talking about, all 89 would go to the Nez Perce tribe.
Yeah, so we wouldn't lose any water that's used to generate power at the existing power.
Correct.
what's the differential in the, how much more water could the tribe's hatchery utilize if they had all they needed? I mean, how much bigger would you have to build the yellow pipeline? They're running under the river the other way, and
That number keeps growing. But I believe the tribe has said they could use up to 160 CFS,
so how many CFS is gonna come down the yellow pipe?
125
Oh, sorry, so,
for the state.
yeah, and that'll fill up that
That'll take
clear
care of
water
the
hatchery.
state's needs.
But they could still pump. Right? 'Cause they're
They
pumping
could
right
continue
now.
to pump, yes.
There's some sort of a disease issue or something that they're trying to mitigate for with the water out of the dam.
Correct. The water is not as cool or as clean as they would like coming out of the river. And so they're spending a lot of money right now pumping water out and then running it through various systems. Both entities would very much like full gravity fed water coming out of the dam.
Mark,
What, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Allen or Brian, either one, the yellow pipeline, is that gonna be steel lined? What's the thought there? Do we know?
Our current thinking is that it would be a high pressure steel pipeline.
With ceramic coating or will it matter?
Probably haven't gotten that far in detail yet, but as for cost estimating purposes, yeah, we assume the high pressure steel pipeline.
Mark.
Follow up, the existing blue line, it's got what kind of lining?
It has a mortar lining on the inside of the steel
Well,
pipe.
can that can be redone, can it, as time goes on?
It can.
To extend the life?
You have to shut it off.
The
Yeah, shut it off,
challenge is
yeah.
that,
Scroll.
yeah, you have to shut the pipeline off to reline it.
Right.
And since it's the only water supply pipeline to the Clearwater Fish Hatchery, that would be a bit of a challenge.
Mr. Chair.
Joanne,
I have a follow-up question that would be, since the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service owns that pipeline, would the maintenance of that pipeline be back on them, or would it be on the state?
For the blue pipeline, yes, any maintenance that needs to be done on the pipeline is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife responsibility.
Mr. Chairman, Brian, the hydro capacity of the existing line is, how big is that?
The existing small hydro plant is a 3 megawatt generator.
But the new one would have the same capacity then?
We've looked at a couple of different options, and for right now, we're just assuming a 3 megawatt generator. It might be a little bigger because it would carry a little more flow.
Mr. Chairman.
Pat,
Brian, what's the pressure at the bottom?
Oh, gosh. You have to ask me that question, Pat, Mr. Chairman, Pat. It's enough to turn a 3 megawatt generator. Yeah, I mean, and the work shack is 700 feet high, so it's 700 feet of pressure. I don't have the PSI number right off the top of my head.
2.3, if the dam was full, 2.3, it'd be 1,500 pounds, just ballpark. Pretty good pipe.
Yeah.
Pat, or excuse me, Brian.
Mr. Chairman, Brian, did Dvorak, and I know you got Corps of Engineers, and did Dvorak fill this year or last year? I'm sure Kay was looking at it, cloud seeding. Need to know what states there.
Mr. Chairman, Brian, Dvorak filled both years up.
This would just be diverting water that otherwise would be flowing down the river through the pipeline and then into the river out of the raceways.
That is correct.
Would that require one?
No, I don't think so. It's just a,
Would it require a water?
just a change in the point of diversion.
Mr. Chairman, Dean, building that yellow pipeline probably would require a water right. Because you'd have a new use of the water out of North Fork Clearwater River. For both, fish production and probably the hydropower.
You still have water, right?
Mr. Chairman, Brian, the cost of this is roughly $70 million. How many agencies are going to be contributing into the pool of money?
I am going to kick that question to my friend, Mr. Allen.
Chairman, that is open for discussion right now. There's two paths we can go by. Didn't mean to pull that up, but I did. If we go with state funds, we can do this quick, and quick means 7 years. If we involve the federal government and the hoops you have to jump through just to get on the radar screen, it'll be 10 plus years to get on. So we're looking at financing options for the power. And then trying to see if that plus some state money could cover the bill, or if we do want to reach out to some federal agencies with some responsibilities and discuss them kicking in as well.
Mark.
I don't know if this is a can of worms or not, but
It is.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Allen, would you care to comment on this project in relation to the political environment of removing the four upper dam? Is this your thoughts there?
Mr. Chairman, are there any reporters in the room?
Well,
Ours, yeah.
We're on Zoom.
So we have, early on, we reached out to the Nez Perce tribe and inquired as to their interests in this pipeline. And their initial responses were very favorable. They despite being on the other side of the lawsuits regarding the dams, the tribes have always been strong advocates for hatchery and hatchery production. So they're a bit, in their own mind, divorced on this, right? They don't believe that this is the solution, the only solution, but they're willing to continue and eager to continue running that hatchery at full capacity and seeing what the results are and opening up more harvest opportunities. If we bring that hatchery up to full production, would they drop out of the lawsuit? I would not bet a shiny quarter on that.
Other questions? Okay, I think we just continue to study and learn as we go here. And if we have some money available, if we continue to have money available, like to be a part of it.
So they're in the trench.
And whatever you think needs to be made like bigger, right?
Okay, Brian, back at my side again. Regional managers update?
Yes, Michelle Richmond, Department of Water Resources, Regional Manager for Northern Idaho, will provide a report on items of interest in her region.
Here from Coeur d'Alene.
Yes, her office is in Coeur d'Alene.
Okay, we worked out the details of how to operate.
I think so. So thank you for having me today. I actually grew up here in Moscow and I attended University of Idaho, got my degree in mechanical engineering here. So it's good to be back in town. Thanks. And if you didn't hear my update last year, I worked in Southern region for IWRB for 14 years. And I came up to Northern 2 years ago to work on safety of dams, and then became the regional manager 6 months later in January of 2022. Similar to last year, I'll walk through some priorities of each program and just give you some highlights. So here's our org chart for the region. The overall picture is we have 6 programs, and those are water allocations, adjudication, stream channel protection, groundwater protection, hydrogeology, and safety of dams. And I'll talk about some big changes that have happened in the last year. So the one big one is we had our water rights supervisor, Adam Frederick, actually left. He left to go to Oregon to be closer to family. So we're down 1 supervisor, and we're also down 1 agent in the allocations group. Another big change was we had our safety of dams engineer was transition to a water resource agent position. And then within our hydrogeology program, some good things happened. We were able to recently hire on John Postian as a BSU contracted worker. He is supporting our hydrogeology, as well as Dean Garwood, who works part-time as a geologist. And both of those positions are contracted positions that the board has helped fund and are fully funded, and we are very appreciative for that. And some stability was in the education program. Evan Rhoda is the supervisor, and he has done a very good job. We had 2 new agents start in that group 1 year ago, and he did a great job of training them. Susie Cooley's our paralegal and been with the department or as a legal staff for years. So that's our organization chart. I'll move into the adjudication. So our CFPRBA, that's Clark Fork Ponderay Basin, Clark Fork Ponderay River Basin adjudication. We took in 8,000 claims and we took, let's see, and we processed so far just about 200 recommendations. And as the chart shows, the entire PRBA, which is Palouse River Basin adjudication, took in 2,000 claims. So that gives you some perspective on the effort undertaken for the CFPRBA. You likely heard about some workshops. One happened in May of 2022 in Sandpoint. And we had another adjudication workshop in Sandpoint in April of 2023. The one in April was somewhat less well attended, but both were successful. And I talked about the 2 new agents that started a year ago. They're doing fabulously. The CFPRBA had a milestone. We just passed a filing deadline for claims taking on June 23rd of 2023. And so claims taking has slowed down a little bit, and we are transitioning into the recommendations mode. Couple of other highlights that aren't on the slide. The PRBA has an approaching milestone on August 18th. The partial decrees will be issued for almost 1,800 claims. And then as a final note on adjudication, Shelley Keene and other staff are gearing up to explore an adjudication in the Kootenai River Basin. And we'll be talking with Kootenai Valley Resource Initiative and other entities to open a discussion with various parties to discuss a possible adjudication. Moving on to allocations, these charts show applications per permit received by the region, and they're for the calendar years 2019 to 2022. Purple is representing Northern region, and I showed this chart last time. As you can see, Northern continued to have a growing portion of the department's applications for permit, and it does definitely keep us very, very busy. This chart shows applications for permit received at Northern as well. It broke it down. Oh, sorry, the numbers are kind of not looking great. But the idea is that the numbers really started having an uptick when the adjudication started in June of 2021. You can see the numbers of applications received was in the 600s rather than for the earlier years where the PRBA was happening. Those numbers were in the 200s. So it really was an increased level of activity. Another area that took a back seat. Let's see, so the first area that took a kind of had to be on the back burner because of some staffing issues was licensing. That was paused. And then RAFN applications also had to be put on pause. Those are, RAFN stands for reasonably anticipated future needs. And those are applications that water providers or municipalities are applying for their future water rights. So those are on hold, but filling the water rights supervisor position should help with that. Moving on to licensing. here's, these charts again break it down by calendar year. And northern again represents, is represented by purple. And we were doing well through 2021 on these, but as I said, with the water rights supervisor leaving, we had to put things on the back burner. So moving on. The good news about licensing is that the current licensing backlog consists mostly of the most recent filings. And so with very few where proof was made prior to 2020. Here's our well construction activity for the past few years. And purple shows well construction applications received at the region. And then orange represents the inspections completed. Scott Potter is our well construction specialist. He started in May of 2021, and that's where that green arrow is. And you can see his activity in the field and doing inspections really shot up at that point. And in fact, his inspection rate is 39%, which exceeds the strategic benchmark goal of 30%. Another thing about Scott is he has really good rapport with the drillers, and they do see him as a resource and really do seek his consultation often. And that keeps everybody in compliance, which is good for our region. So he gave a talk at the National Groundwater Association in Coeur d'Alene last year, and it was very well received by the drilling community. It's a tight-knit group, and it's going really well right now. Our stream channel protection program is also in very good shape right now. We have had in the past some vacancies that have been hard to fill, but Emily Barnes has been our protection specialist since January of 2022. The green arrow shows when she started, and applications for stream channel alteration are shown in orange, and then the permitted projects are shown in purple. And even with a 3-month maternity leave in early 2023, she kept things going and managed her workload really well. So her strength is permitting projects within the 60-day work window, almost all the projects, which is again aligning with the strategic benchmark. She also helps quite a lot with complaints, and we get at least one a day in summer, sometimes more, and just neighbors complaining about neighbors and neighbors doing things they shouldn't be. And she has a good approach and has a goal of getting people into compliance, and her approach reaches resolution pretty quickly. Okay, this slide, I wanted to point out that a trend that's been happening the last few years is we're having an increase in comment and protests from agencies that are concerned. And so you'll see that chart above the photo showing 2020 and 2021 and 2022 with that increase occurring. And the 2021 protests were from Latah County, and they were protesting the domestic groundwater rights. And based on those protests, the applicants agreed basically to agreed with the protestant to reduce their application diversion rate from 0.04 to 0.02 CFS. The majority of the protests in 2022 were from Idaho Fish and Game, mainly for basins 96 and 97, which are the basins that encompass Priest Lake and Lake Monterey. These protests mainly concern minimum stream flows, mainly on the Priest River and its tributaries and the Pack River. As for the protested applications, Fish and Game's approach has been to counsel the applicants on the self-curtailment process when minimum stream flow water rights are not being met. And about a third of those protests still need to be resolved. Next one is NOAA, National Marine Fisheries Service, out of Moscow, has become more engaged in our temporary water approvals. And mainly in for surface water and Clearwater Basin. DEQ and Fish and Game and also the Nez Perce tribe have also been more vocal in the past year in this Clearwater Basin area. And for the temporary applications, those typically involve recreational mining. And in our region, we've been adding special conditions on the temporary applications, emphasizing self-curtailment when minimum stream flow water rates are not being met, and then also required water use data from the applicants to be made available upon request. The last item to mention here is that I gave a talk on the history of the Priest Lake Dam last week to the Priest River Watershed Group. And board member Ben Stone was present, for which I was very appreciative. And I mentioned this talk to you now because Priest River Watershed Group is working to gain knowledge from agencies and the tribes to understand lake management and river management in the Priest River area. And it's possible they may approach the board with either questions or recommendations or both. And moving on to dams, as you saw in the org chart and I mentioned, our safety of dams engineer is now a water resource agent who can't do inspections. So the inspections will need to be done collaboratively by myself and by other members of the department. And it'll have to be a joint effort. Northern region has 42 dams that we inspect on an alternating schedule. 8 of those are mine tailings impoundment structures. And our program manager for the Safety of Dams program has taken a lead role in monitoring those mine tailings impoundment structures. Okay, so as for hydrogeology, I want to emphasize that the main goal is to continue characterization of the aquifers in this region and to expand our monitoring networks. And thanks to the support from the board again, we now have additional contracted help, which will increase the throughput on these efforts for Northern region. And I know Daniel Sturgis, who is speaking to you next, has placed priority on expanding monitoring in the Palouse area, as well as portions of Idaho north of the Rafton Prairie. So these are some regional successes to share with you. We do have a fast-paced work environment. We have a productive and capable staff of 14 people right now, hopefully soon to be 16 people. We have navigated much change. I'm the 4th regional manager in 10 years, but the staff has weathered all that change really well. And last, I just want to reiterate the adjudication successes and milestones reached recently. It's been a concerted effort by the region, and I'm proud of the staff for their accomplishments. And we are not without our challenges. As I've conveyed, staffing issues are still present, and workload management, because of that, tends to be a constant focus. Often feels like a juggling act. But with that said, we will carry forward and continue with the CFPRBA switching into the recommendations mode. And we'll continue with the allocations filings that are still coming in at a high rate at the moment. They may slow down. We'll work with municipal providers to process their RAFN applications for future appropriations. We will plan to expand the groundwater monitoring network and continue aquifer characterization work. And we plan to do public outreach to explore the possibility of Kootenai River Basin education. And that sums up what I wanted to communicate to you today. So thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for coming and making that presentation. It looks like all across the state, there's a lot of work to do, and
A lot of work.
be nice if we had a few more hands to do it. Any questions? Pat?
First, Michelle, thank you for your efforts through the struggles with staffing item. My question is, how many of the permit requests that you received were domestic?
Most of them, almost all of them.
And it's just new development?
Yes, a lot of new development.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Chairman.
Oh, I do have one.
Yeah, Michelle, follow up on Pat's question. Are most of them wells that you're getting the domestics on?
We have a lot of wells. We also have a lot of water rights out of the lakes, especially with adjudication happening up in the Priest River and Ponderay area. A lot of people realize when they're filing their claims that, oh, they have a water intake in the lake that they need to also apply for an application for permit on. So
Okay,
a lot of domestics out of the lakes.
thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Joanne?
So Michelle, when you say new permits, are they like, they've been using the intake out of the lake for years and now they're just with the adjudication realizing that they really need to get a permit? So it's not a
Yes.
new use of the water, it's just now being permitted.
Yes, that's a lot. That happens a lot. There are also new uses coming in where people are actually doing it the way they should have been all along.
Okay. Last call. Okay, thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
All right, next, status of the Northern Idaho aquifers.
Yeah, Daniel Sturgis, our hydrogeologist out of the Coeur d'Alene office, will give this presentation.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for having me today. This is the second time I've been able to present information to you over the past couple of years, and I understand that there are some new members to the board, and so I thought I'd take a moment to kind of revisit some topics that we discussed last year in Lewiston. It's going to include just the general hydrogeology of the region. That should help set the stage for the northern groundwater resources. Talk briefly about our groundwater monitoring network up here. And then I'll give you an update on the 3 areas of primary interest in the northern region, that being the Sluice Basin, which is where we're at today, the Rathdrum Prairie up by Coeur d'Alene, and the Lewiston Plateau. So first we have, we can kind of take a step back and look at our region just in a geological sense to get an idea of our groundwater resources. Most of the region is made up of fractured bedrock, 75%. Fractured bedrock is typically not a very productive source type to pump water from, but it makes up a big chunk of our region. The rest is made up of either the Columbia River basalt, which are what is here in the Blues Basin, or unconsolidated sediment, which is mostly found Coeur d'Alene and north on up into the Canadian border. We have these three primary areas of interest, plus we have an area of drilling concern that I work with. We have the Spokane Valley Rathenbury Aquifer. We have a groundwater management area there called the Rathenbury Groundwater Management Area. We have a groundwater management area in the Lewiston Plateau. We're also very interested in what's happening in the Food Basin, even though we don't have a specific groundwater management area and management plan with the basin. We do help, we do keep tabs on it because of the issues and concerns here. Our monitoring network is 130 wells that grows over time as we expand. We also do lose some wells from time to time due to development, particularly up in Putnam County. With John being here now, we're going to push north up to Sandpoint and Bonners Ferry and the Priest River area. There's growing interest and concern through the communities there because of development. And since we don't do a lot, we don't have any data, it's very hard to assess what's happening there. And hard for, say, Bonner County to develop a good water resource plan for their county, kind of the master plan. So we're going to push north. There's a lot of interest, and since we have the support of the communities, it should make that expansion, I think, doable and successful. I thought I'd start off with talking about the Blues Basin because that's where we are at today. Now, later today, we'll be taking a tour, a little field trip around the Blues Basin to talk about this in more detail. Today, I'll just highlight a few things for you. We monitor 6 wells in Latah County. 4 of them are in the Blues Basin in the Moscow area. We have a few that I've been monitoring from time to time. It's hard for me to, one person to hit up all these wells. Now that John's here, he's going to be helping me out with all that. And so those inactive or random kind of monitoring points will become more consistent. The upside, though, is that the Blues Basin Aquifer Committee does monitor a large number of wells in the Blues Basin. 12 of those are in the Moscow area, but they're limited to the Moscow area.
Can I ask a question? We have designated the Blues Basin as a groundwater management area. What, is there a like designation on the Washington side of the border, or how does Washington view that aquifer?
We do not have a groundwater management area here, nor does Washington. But Washington is much more restrictive in terms of their water rights. So it's very hard to get a new water right in Washington. And so their management really is, they don't allow any new water rights. Whereas in Idaho, we still would do all that. So it's kind of managed in Washington through, they don't allow it. So they don't have a management area. The Blues Basin Aquifer Committee and the members of that includes the University of Idaho, Washington State University, Latah County, Whitman County, and Moscow and Pullman cities. They collectively have put together a management plan for themselves. It's not something that we, the state, administer, but they kind of agreed to a few sets of rules in terms of trying to reduce pumping and become more efficient in terms of their water use. So they do have a local plan. It's just not through the state.
Thank you.
The Blues Basin has 2 different aquifers that we treat separately. There's an upper aquifer here. It's made up primarily of what's called the Wanapum basalt. It's shown in blue there. This is where all domestic wells in Idaho, on the Idaho side, drill into and find water. The city of Moscow does have some wells in this aquifer that they pump. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. But there's a lower aquifer, and it's made up of primarily the Grand Ronde basalt. There are sediments mixed in there as well. We don't quite understand the extent of this aquifer because it's not, most of the new wells all go into the upper aquifer. So we don't have as much knowledge about the lower aquifer as we could have because people don't drill into it. So what we are doing is we have funding and a project together. I'm working on getting a driller contracted to drill a new monitoring well to the eastern extent of what we think is this lower aquifer, to collect data and to assess whether or not it's there. How small is this aquifer? And that's something that we're going to actually talk about more today on the field trip. So this, we've been monitoring water levels, with IWR has for several years in the upper aquifer of the Bruce Basin. And this is a graph showing that water level trend over the last 15 years or so, and matched up with pumping from the city of Moscow, one of their municipal wells. So water levels had been declining for a number of years. The city has made great efforts on reducing their production from this well to basically zero. And that has allowed water levels to start to recover. And that's benefiting the aquifer. So we're starting to see that recovery. We're now at a water level elevation similar to what we saw in 2010. So this is very promising. What I understand is what's going to happen is that the city will like to fine tune this and see how much they can actually pump out of that aquifer and keep things just stable. But when you keep things just stable, you don't allow for any new growth, which is the domestic side of all this. And so that is still, for me, a concern is the growth of the domestic side of this. And at some point, there will be enough domestic wells to offset any reduction in pumping from that the city has made. It may be 10 years, it may be 50 years, it may be 100 years, I don't know. So as this is a hydrograph of the lower aquifer that we monitor, and with the pumping from both the city and the University of Idaho, the city pumps about 85% of the total water out of the, compared to 15% from the University of Idaho. So the University of Idaho is a small player in all this, mostly the city. And because the city's pumping less from the upper aquifer, they still need that water. So they pump more from the lower aquifer, which causes water levels to continue to decline. And you can see during the summer months, in the blue hydrograph, you see a lot more fluctuation, and that's because of that increased demand on the lower aquifer. We see here in Idaho now just under a foot per year of water level decline in our monitoring. This decline has been going on for decades, almost I would say close to a century. And this is what is of major concern. I understand that PVAC has met with some of you to talk about their alternative water supply scenarios. And this is why. This won't last forever. And so they're looking to seek water elsewhere. So just to kind of recap, the upper aquifer in Moscow is improving because the city has reduced their production of it. That, again, that reduction will eventually be offset by the domestic sector. I don't know when that'll be, but it will happen. The lower aquifer continues to decline. If anything were to happen to this, there's bedrock underneath. Drilling a deeper well won't get you more water. It'll get you into that. We do monitor a few wells in the rural part of the county. And what I'm seeing just through a few years of monitoring, that water levels appear to be quite stable, if not even improving compared to what's on the well. And that's probably all climate driven. We'll go north now up to Spokane Valley Raft and Prairie Aquifer. We have a groundwater management area and a management plan for this area that was established in 2002 and 2005. The state adopted a comprehensive aquifer management plan for the Spokane Valley Raft and Prairie Aquifer in 2011. This is yet another bi-state aquifer in our region, and it serves pretty much the whole population, over 500,000 people, and that number, with growth continues to increase. We did work with the U.S. Geological Survey back in the early 2000s to do some more characterization of this aquifer and to develop a groundwater flow model. That's been, 16 years now, and we continue to monitor this aquifer. We have 39 wells in the area. The USGS monitor that I monitor, the IWRB monitors, the USGS has one. In fact, the USGS only has one monitor well in all of Idaho. That's different down in the southern part of the state. We try to equip all these with pressure transducers. We also monitor several wells on the bedrock areas, because the bedrock areas surrounding the Raft and Prairie Aquifer are of a concern from the residents and from the county. And so we're trying to increase that monitoring to help us understand more what's happening with that water resource. This is from the USGS well, and it's a great example because we can look back in time to the 70s, and what we see are these fluctuations, and they occur about every 5 to 8 years, responding to, if we look at precipitation events, responding to these wet and dry years. In fact, we're better off now than we were back in the 70s because of what happened in the late 90s. So as long as we continue to see at least once in a while a really good winter, particularly at lower elevations, we should continue to see this pattern. My concern with the Raft and Prairie is not so much growth, but climate change and long-term drought that may be coming ahead. But we're better off now than we were in the 70s. We're also better off now looking back to our earliest monitoring data compared to the 1920s. The water level was actually about 15 feet lower than it is at present day. Looking at, we had a really good year in 2017. We're now coming up to 2024. Every year now I keep thinking we're going to have a good winter to get a good recharge event. So looking at what NOAA's predicting for the region, it doesn't look like it's going to happen this winter. It's going to be warm and probably average precipitation, which means at these lower elevations, that's rainfall. We need a good snowpack, particularly at lower elevations. So I'm not expecting to see it this year. I hope to see it next year. If we don't, maybe we're into one of these longer drought cycles that we haven't seen since the 20s and 30s. Just so to recap, for the Raft and Prairie Aquifer, we've had quite a bit of growth in this area, municipal growth and domestic type growth. But I'm not seeing anything of concern. The aquifer seems to be accommodating this growth. Like I said, we're better off now than we have been in the past. But my concern is that we get into some sort of long-term drought cycle again. It will happen at some point in time, but I don't know when that will happen. But we could see water levels come down to about 15 feet. If we start testing that minimum level that we saw in the 1920s, then I'll really get concerned. But that may be something, right now, we don't see that. We do continue to grow our network, in key areas to understand boundary conditions and recharge. I've been working closely with some municipal, system managers to do pumping tests, which help us understand the hydraulic properties and aquifer properties, that we can do just through domestic wells. Domestic wells can pump the aquifer hard enough to see a lot of response. We have to use these municipal wells. They've been very supportive. We've done 2 different sites now. What I am seeing with that is that our observed kind of measured properties are much, like hydraulic connectivity, much lower than what USGS modeled back in 2007. And so we're hoping to gain enough information to kind of constrain things. The concern is with the growth in the bedrock areas. These fractures can be limited resources when there's problems. For example, just south of the Spokane, just that state line south of the Spokane River, there's 3 wells that supply water to 20 homes. And in 2021, 2 of those wells, which are on the same fracture, had problems. And so they were down to 1 well for these 20 homes, and they could not meet the demand. And so if one fracture has problems and somebody's in there, everybody's going to have a problem with that zone. So there's issues with growth there and whether or not this bedrock area can accommodate that growth. Moving south now, we will take a look at the Lewiston Plateau. IDWR established a groundwater management area here in 2013 and adopted a plan in 2015. The plan and the reason for the management area is to really address concerns and water level declines in the uppermost aquifers, which is called the Saddle Mountains, and then the Wanapum Aquifer. We have different sub areas to address different concerns, so we have a little bit different policies. Some relevant goals I thought I'd mention today is in the plan is 1, we protect existing and future groundwater rights and groundwater quality. Not only are quantity an issue, but this area also has high nitrates in the uppermost aquifer and high enough where you just don't want to drink the water. It's well above EPA limits. And so we're trying not to manage that through well construction. You don't want commingling of water, and we want to inform people, even though they may be allowed to drill a shallow well and pump from that aquifer, it may not be in their best interest to do so because of the nitrate problem. So that means we make people go deeper. Another goal and policy is promote the use of surface water where available for new water uses. This isn't usually a realistic goal or policy because people aren't near a surface water source or one that is viable. And we're also improving the understanding of the extent of the aquifers there and the properties of the aquifers. So this Columbia River basalt that we have in Moscow and we have down in Lewiston are part of this huge geologic formation that spans most of the Pacific Northwest. They are made up of many different basalt flows. And in Washington, Idaho, and Oregon, the Columbia River basalts have water problems in terms of water level declines. Heavily managed in Oregon and in Washington, and a bit here in Idaho. So Dean and I have been working hard to understand the geology more of this area, and we do that through collecting rock samples and well cuttings and doing lab analysis. And it allows us to see which basalt flows are where, because you look at well log, it all looks like basalt, but eventually you get enough information. You can start to understand where people are finding water. We get enough understanding of how to construct these wells so that we're not going to commingle aquifers and cause other problems. And so we've worked hard on developing a number of cross sections to help people find the water that they need without kind of messing it up. This zone here, it's called the Wapshilla, the salt flow member. May not mean a whole lot to you folks, but that's okay. It means something to the community. This is where most of domestic wells find water, is this Wapshilla, the salt flow member. So it's a very important water bearing basalt flow to the community. So we have these three aquifers. I thought I'd just start to show you what happens with the uppermost aquifer, the Saddle Mountains. We don't really allow too many wells. We haven't allowed any new wells actually to be drilled in the Saddle Mountains. But over time, we've been monitoring those water levels, and they look good. We monitor about 16 wells, and they're looking okay. What the issue here is these wells are not that productive. 1,000 gallons per day kind of production value. But overall, it looks water levels are looking good. We go down to the Wanapum basalt, which is this light blue area in cross section and on the map. The red dashed line is kind of where I think the boundary of the aquifer is. That's just because outside of this, nobody seems to find any water in the Wanapum. And I think a lot of the recharge is coming from this Tammany Creek area here. It also is connected to the Snake and Clearwater rivers near the port. And we have quite a few problems here. So we have continued water level declines over the years. This is the Lindsay Creek area. One well is now, since we've only been monitoring for a few years, but is now declining at a rate of 4 inches per year. And other wells are declining at just over 1.5 feet per year. This continued decline is concerned. This is why we no longer allow any new wells to seek water from this zone, and we require them to seal it off. This area around Lindsay Creek is consistently seeing wells, domestic wells being deepened. And so you go from, or replaced with a Grand Ronde well. And so all of a sudden, well has problems, and now it costs, $60,000 to $80,000 to drill it in ground. And I think that this problem is being caused by the city of Lewiston well number 4. It has the most production out of it, and it has the lowest water level elevation and the most decline over the years. The water level here should be at about 750 feet in elevation. We're at 580 feet. So that decline and this red zone is sort of this cone of depression being developed and propagated by this pump as well. And so as this well continues to pump and this cone of depression continues to grow, more and more wells, domestic wells, have problems and eventually need to be deepened or replaced. Some of these wells will not last 10, 15 more years. So there's about 24 domestic wells in this area. We get to look at the Wanapum water level trends in Tammany Creek drainage, so just south of Lindsay Creek. We see quite a bit of decline, but they've actually stabilized since 2015 or so and even recovered slightly. So that's promising. We're still learning a lot about this area in terms of the geology and what it is we're actually monitoring and estimating recharge. But again, nobody is allowed to pump a new well in this zone, but we are seeing some positive response. hopefully this stabilization continues, but we haven't seen too many problems lately in the water pump along Tammany Creek. We get down to the Grand Run basalts. This is where we require all new wells to really go in. We now have 160 wells in the Grand Run in our management area alone. Lapway Valley and the city of Lapway and the residents in that area also produce from the Grand Run. We do monitor a large number of wells here, 45, and that continues to grow. This, the Grand Run has been known to be quite good. The reason why we want people to pump from this zone is because it's been relatively stable. And we saw some positive effects of the, when the lower Granite Dam went in 1975. So that really brought up all that brought up the reservoir behind the dam about 30 feet at Lewiston. And we saw a positive response to that. In 1994, Wyatt Engineering did a study for the Lewiston Orchards Irrigation District, did a groundwater flow model, and looked at sort of what effects may have occurred. How did this dam really affect our groundwater resources? And as we get further and further away from the confluence of the Snake and the Clearwater River at downtown Lewiston here, we see less and less of a response to the dam. We get out towards the orchards area, maybe a foot or so. And that makes sense because, you know, the further you get away from that source, the less you see that. So if this dam were to ever go away, you can just kind of just subtract what we saw. So we may see an extra foot or two decline in the orchards area. So this Grand Run basalt is where everybody pumps water from. Not sure why we have green lines and other things showing up here. So the major municipalities pump from this Grand Run. City of Lewiston does have a couple wells in the water pump, but primarily they produce water from groundwater from the Grand Run. So the Asotin Public Utility Department over in Clarkston pumps about 4,800 acre feet a year. Lewiston Orchards can pump around 1,800 acre feet a year. The city of Lewiston around 1,000 acre feet per year. That number is low because the city gets all of their water, most of their water from the Clearwater River. The next biggest water user is the Red Pheasant Water Company. It is shown in red there. I don't have their usage amount, but they have a water rate for 665 acre feet a year. They probably get 400 or 500 acre feet. In 2021, we had a difficult year, not only in this region, but the state in general, very dry spring and summer. This is groundwater production from the Lewiston Orchards Irrigation District wells. The blue being their domestic use, so wells 2, 3, and 4, and the orange being their new irrigation wells that are a part of that Lewiston Orchards exchange project. In 2021, they pumped 1,837 acre feet out of the Grand Run. To put that into context, the water right is for 11,543 acre feet. So any effects that we see, things 5, 6 times. And we did see quite a bit of response to this pumping. And so we'll kind of talk about that. This is a nearby well, a half a mile from the well field. We saw an extra 20 feet of depression that summer caused by this extra pumping from Void 5 and 6. That pumping went down, but water levels didn't just spring right back up. We've seen this continued water level decline over the past couple of years. looking at what happened to the Grand Ronde more regionally, between the spring high of 2021 and our spring high of 2022, keeping in mind most of that effect took place in between 2021 and 2022. But looking at what has happened over the last couple of years, around the orchards area, we have seen 6 to 12 feet water level drop in the highs. And so, and the further we get away from those wells, the less we saw. In fact, we get over to Lapway Valley and it looks quite stable, if not even better. We have had a few issues in 2021. A lot of these I'm not aware of until after they occur, because I want to out doing monitoring and talk to the community. In 2021, at the end of the summer, down in this area, this well here had to be deepened from the Wapshilla basalt, where everybody pumps water from, to the next big zone down, which is called the Mount Horrible China Creek zone. So that well had to be deepened from 710 feet to 1,200 feet, so 490 feet. The water level, the depth to water level changed from 670 to 850 feet. The well near the Snake River, that's owned and operated by, it's operated by the state Parks and Rec department. It's an irrigation well. They could not pump this well at the end of the summer because of extra drawdown. It shut off their pump to avoid damage to the pump. And so we had two issues that we know of for sure in Lewiston from this extra summer pumping. What I'd like to note, what I think is worth noting, is that when wells get deepened in Lewiston, they don't get deepened by 10 feet or 50 feet. They get deepened by 250 feet, 500 feet. This is very expensive. Not only expensive to drill, but also expensive to replace the pump and the piping and the electrical. And so there's been conflict. We also have not quite responded to a verbal complaint by a domestic user in Lewiston complaining about the extra pumping from the orchards area. So to kind of recap here, the Saddle Mountains looks good. We don't allow people to really drill in there. I don't typically have a problem with it. What happens is it's hit or miss drilling. They have one chance to find water, and it's kind of dumb luck. We'll talk about this on the field trip. You're drilling a 6-inch hole in the ground and you're trying to find a fracture, and you could be drilling into a big chunk of basalt that's 10 feet big with a 6-inch hole. That could just be dense rock. We'll talk more about that on our field trip. There's high nitrates in that. And what had happened in the past, from what I can tell, is that wells, a residential area would be developed, and they would have every 5 acres, they'd have a domestic well in the Saddle Mountains. They'd be maybe 100 feet or 200 feet apart. That's not far enough apart. We need to have these wells 400 or 500 feet apart to avoid well-to-well interference. And so we can manage this. And the water can be there. It's just not typically in high enough quantities for people, and it can have poor water quality. The Wanapum basalt, like I mentioned, the Lindsay Creek area is continuing to see water level declines and well deepening. Our current management practices are not in place to stabilize this aquifer. And I believe that there is a solution to this problem, and it will benefit the long-term sustainability of this aquifer in that area, avoid for future water level declines and conflict, and be economical to the families of the Lindsay Creek area. And that is we can't increase recharge to it, but what we could do is work with the city of Lewiston to have them stop pumping well number 4. They only pump 150 to 300 acre feet out of that well, but that's enough to cause this water levels to decline and pull everything down. So that's like putting a 150 homes or 300 homes right in one spot. And so I think we can fix that problem. The Grand Run assault in Lewiston, we're seeing the response to this initial Lewiston Orchards Exchange project coming off the surface water to these groundwater wells. I've had a meeting with the Bureau of Reclamation a couple of weeks ago. I understand Lloyd and the kind of the stakeholders are interested in maybe doing something different, pumping from the Clearwater River. I believe that pumping from the Clearwater River is in the best interest of the Lewiston Plateau for long-term sustainability. It'll help us avoid future conflict. It'll help us avoid extra management. And like I said, if we have problems, wells get deepened by 500 feet sometimes. That's a big cost to a family. So some of the tasks that I have ahead of me, and John is going to be part of Dean will be a part of that. We continue to improve our understanding of the aquifers there. The location, how are they related to surface water bodies? And what are the properties? But we can only really do so much with existing wells. We need to drill more along the Snake River and even down by the confluence with this Clearwater River to understand the geology, understand the relationship to these surface water bodies. And there's also this need for a groundwater flow model, transient groundwater flow model, so that we can assess new water rates. A big part of my job is to monitor water levels, collect data, but I also use all that to help other programs such as well drilling and allocations and adjudication. So data helps drive understanding, which helps me provide people with the best information that I can provide to help them find the water that they need. And a groundwater flow model will help us understand what the new well goes in or a new water right is applied for, or a transfer is applied for. We can assess it to really understand more of the potential impacts. With that, I will take any questions and hopefully I can answer this.
Any board members, questions?
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I don't want this to be a lengthy answer because it's close to lunch. But is the Grand Ronde aquifer in the Palouse area related to the Grand Ronde aquifer in the Lewiston Basin?
No, it's not. They are not physically connected because of geologic structures along the Snake and Clearwater River. Very different elevations, similar basaltful, but not the same.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? I suppose we're going to learn more as the day goes on.
We will have more discussions as we have a tour of the Palouse Basin. It is very warm out there.
Of course.
So hopefully we can stay hydrated and things.
All right, Brian.
City of Moscow, or at least this hotel's doing their part. Warning, you only have 2 seconds to walk the soap off of your hand.
That's
Great up here.
Okay, all right. One final agenda item, any non-action items that we need to discuss in this work session? Yeah, I think we're good to go. Entertain a motion to adjourn the session.
I move to adjourn.
Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. We will have lunch. Following lunch, we will converse.